The winter wind cut through the downtown streets like glass, sharp and unforgiving. Emma Bennett pulled her worn coat tighter around her body as she walked through the park gates, her son Oliver's small hand wrapped firmly in hers. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting golden pools across the fresh snow that blanketed the ground. It was Christmas Eve, and the city hummed with the energy of families rushing home, arms loaded with gifts and faces flushed with holiday cheer. Emma carried no such packages. Her canvas bag held only a tin of sugar cookies she had baked that morning before her shift at the diner, still warm and fragrant with vanilla. She had promised Oliver they could feed the ducks before heading home to their small apartment above the laundromat. It was their tradition, humble but theirs. Oliver tugged at her hand, his brown eyes wide beneath his knitted cap. "Mama, look. That man is crying." Emma followed his gaze to a figure seated alone on a bench near the frozen pond. Even from a distance, she could see the slump of his shoulders, the way his head hung low despite the expensive cut of his charcoal coat. Something about his posture spoke of a bone-deep exhaustion that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. "Oliver, we should leave him alone," Emma whispered, but her son had already slipped his hand free. Before she could stop him, Oliver was walking across the snow-dusted path, his small boots leaving prints behind him. Emma hurried after him, heart racing with a mixture of concern and embarrassment. Strangers in cities did not appreciate interruptions, especially not from children, and this man looked like he belonged to a world far removed from theirs. The man looked up as Oliver approached. His face was handsome in a carved, refined way, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes that held storms Emma could not name. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, but there was an oldness in his expression that spoke of burdens carried too long. "Don't cry, mister," Oliver said with the fearless compassion of childhood. "You can borrow my mama if you need someone." Emma froze, mortified. But instead of annoyance, something shifted in the stranger's face. His eyes, rimmed with red, softened. A breath escaped him that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "Oliver," Emma said gently, finally reaching them. "I am so sorry. He has a very big heart and no sense of personal boundaries." The man shook his head slowly. "No. Please. It's all right." His voice was rough, as though he had not spoken in hours. "That might be the kindest thing anyone has said to me in years." Emma studied him more closely. His clothes were expensive, she could tell that much. The watch on his wrist probably cost more than she made in 6 months. But his eyes held a loneliness she recognized, the kind that came from having everything except what mattered. "Are you hungry?" Emma found herself asking. She opened her canvas bag and pulled out the tin. "We made cookies this morning. They're just sugar cookies, nothing fancy, but they're warm." The man stared at the tin as though she had offered him something sacred. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out and accepted one. When he took a bite, his eyes closed, and Emma saw his throat work as he swallowed. "These are perfect," he said quietly. "Thank you." Oliver beamed and climbed onto the bench beside him without invitation. "I'm Oliver. That's my mama, Emma. We come here every Christmas Eve to see the ducks, but they're sleeping now because it's cold. Are you sad because you don't have any ducks?" The man let out a genuine laugh this time, surprised and raw. "I suppose that might be part of it. I'm Julian." "Why are you alone, Julian?" Oliver asked with the blunt honesty only children possessed. "Don't you have a family?" "Oliver," Emma said sharply, but Julian raised a hand. "It's a fair question." He looked out at the frozen pond, his jaw tight. "I have colleagues. Business partners. People who want things from me. But family? No. I don't have that." Emma sat down on the other side of Oliver, the cookies resting between them. "That must be very hard," she said simply. Julian turned to look at her, really look at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding of one lonely person seeing another. I built everything I have from nothing, Julian said, his voice distant. I thought if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, it would fill the empty spaces. But on nights like this, I realize I'm still that kid sitting alone, waiting for someone to choose me. Emma's heart ached. She knew that feeling, though her loneliness was different. After Oliver's father had walked out when she was pregnant, she had learned to carry the weight alone. But at least she had Oliver. This man had wealth beyond imagining, and yet he had no one. There's a cafe just down the street, Emma said impulsively. They make excellent hot chocolate. Would you like to join us? Julian looked startled. I couldn't impose. You're not imposing, Emma said firmly. You're accepting an invitation. There's a difference. Oliver grabbed Julian's hand. Please come. Mama never invites anyone anywhere. You must be special. Julian's eyes glistened again, but this time with something warmer than grief. He stood slowly, carefully, as though afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. All right. Yes. Thank you. The three of them walked through the park together, Oliver chattering between them about Christmas lights and snowmen and whether Santa's reindeer got cold feet. Julian listened with an attention that seemed almost desperate, as though memorizing every word. The cafe was tucked between two buildings, its windows glowing with amber light. They found a small table near the back, and Emma ordered 3 hot chocolates while Julian and Oliver claimed seats by the window. The warmth of the room wrapped around them like a blanket, and slowly, the tension in Julian's shoulders began to ease. So what do you do, Julian? Emma asked as she returned with steaming mugs topped with whipped cream. I run a technology company, he said carefully. We develop software for corporations. Emma nodded, though she had no real understanding of such things. That sounds important. It pays well, Julian said. But important? I used to think so. Lately, I wonder if I've been chasing the wrong things. Oliver was focused on his hot chocolate, carefully spooning whipped cream into his mouth. Emma watched Julian watch her son, and she saw something tender and wounded in his expression. What about you? Julian asked, turning his attention to Emma. I'm a waitress at Morton's Diner on 5th Street, she said without shame. It's honest work, and it keeps food on our table. I'm saving up to open a small bakery someday. Nothing grand, just a neighborhood place where people feel welcome. That sounds wonderful, Julian said, and he meant it. What would you call it? Oliver's Kitchen, Emma said, smiling at her son. After the person who matters most. Julian's hand tightened around his mug. You're a good mother. I try, Emma said. It's not always easy, but we have each other. That counts for something. They talked for over an hour, about small things and large things, about dreams deferred and hopes still flickering. Julian told them about growing up in foster care, about Christmases spent watching other families through windows, about building his fortune as armor against ever feeling powerless again. Emma shared her own story, about working 2 jobs to support Oliver, about choosing joy even when money was tight, about believing that love mattered more than wealth. Oliver eventually fell asleep against Emma's shoulder, his face peaceful. Julian stared at them both with an expression Emma could not quite read. Thank you, he said finally. For seeing me tonight. For not walking past. Everyone deserves to be seen, Emma said softly. Especially on Christmas Eve. As they prepared to leave, Julian hesitated. Could I see you again? Both of you? Emma considered him carefully. This man from a different world, wounded and wealthy and somehow still hopeful. We're usually at the park on Sundays, she said. If you'd like to join us. Julian's smile was small but genuine. I would like that very much. They parted outside the cafe, Julian heading toward a sleek black car that had appeared as if summoned, Emma and Oliver walking toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. As Emma carried her sleeping son through the snow, she glanced back once and saw Julian still standing there, watching them go. Something had shifted tonight. She could feel it in the air, in the way her heart beat just a little faster. 2 lonely people had found each other in the cold, and perhaps, just perhaps, neither would have to face the winter alone anymore. The diner was busy for a Tuesday morning, the air thick with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Emma moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her order pad tucked into her apron pocket, her smile automatic but genuine. She had worked at Morton's Diner for 3 years now, ever since Oliver was old enough for preschool. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was kind enough to let her work the morning shift so she could pick Oliver up from school in the afternoons. Emma was refilling coffee for a regular customer when the bell above the door chimed. She glanced up out of habit and nearly dropped the pot. Julian Westbrook stood in the doorway, looking impossibly out of place in his tailored navy suit. His eyes scanned the room until they found her, and his face brightened with something that looked like relief. "Sit anywhere," Emma called, trying to keep her voice steady. Her heart had started racing the moment she saw him. He chose a booth near the window, the vinyl seats patched with duct tape, the table surface scarred with years of use. Emma gave him a moment before approaching, using the time to collect herself. It had been 5 days since Christmas Eve, and she had wondered if she would ever see him again. The park on Sunday had felt like a promise, but promises were easy to make and easier to break. "Hi," she said, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get you?" Julian looked up at her, and she saw warmth in his eyes. "Coffee, please. And whatever you recommend for breakfast." "The blueberry pancakes are good," Emma said. "Mrs. Chen makes them from scratch." "Perfect." He paused, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "I was hoping I might see you here. Oliver mentioned where you worked." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You didn't have to come all the way down here. The park on Sunday would have been fine." "I wanted to," Julian said simply. "I've been thinking about that night. About what you said, about everyone deserving to be seen. It made me realize how long I've been invisible to myself." Emma studied him, this wealthy man in his expensive suit sitting in her rundown diner, and she saw sincerity in every line of his face. "I'll get your order in," she said softly. As the morning wore on, Julian stayed. He ordered a second cup of coffee, then a third. He pulled out a tablet and worked quietly, occasionally glancing up when Emma passed by. During her break, she slid into the booth across from him, cradling her own cup of coffee. "Don't you have an office to go to?" she asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. "I own the company," Julian said with a slight smile. "The advantage of being the boss is I can work from wherever I choose." "And you choose a diner on 5th Street?" "I choose to be where you are," Julian said, and the honesty in his voice made Emma's breath catch. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. Julian began coming to the diner 3 or 4 times a week, always sitting in the same booth, always ordering coffee and whatever Emma recommended. They talked during her breaks, short conversations that felt like they contained entire worlds. He told her about his business, about the pressure of managing hundreds of employees, about board meetings that felt like battles. She told him about Oliver's love of dinosaurs, about her dream bakery, about the small joys that made her days worthwhile. One afternoon, as Emma was wiping down tables after the lunch rush, Julian said, "Tell me about Oliver's father." Emma's hand stilled. She had known this question would come eventually. "There's not much to tell. We were young, and he wasn't ready to be a parent. When I told him I was pregnant, he left. I haven't heard from him since." "His loss," Julian said quietly. Emma looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "It was hard at first," she admitted. "But Oliver and I, we're a team. We're enough for each other." "You're extraordinary," Julian said. "Both of you." The weeks turned into a month, and then 2. Julian became part of their routine. He joined them at the park on Sundays, pushing Oliver on the swings, helping him build snowmen, listening to endless stories about school and friends and dreams. Emma watched them together and saw something beautiful forming, a bond between a man who had never known family and a boy who had never known a father. But not everything was perfect. One Thursday afternoon, Emma received a call from Oliver's school. Her son had been in a fight, something that had never happened before. She left work early, her heart pounding with worry, and found Oliver sitting in the principal's office with red eyes and scraped knuckles. "What happened?" Emma asked, kneeling before him. Oliver's lower lip trembled. "They said I was a mistake. That my daddy left because I wasn't good enough. I told them to stop, but they wouldn't, so I pushed Tommy and he pushed me back and then we were fighting." Emma's heart broke. She pulled Oliver into her arms, holding him tight. "You are not a mistake. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Those boys don't know what they're talking about." But the damage was done. That evening, after they returned home, Oliver was quiet in a way that frightened Emma. He picked at his dinner, barely responding to her attempts at conversation. When she tucked him into bed, he looked up at her with eyes too old for his 6 years. "Mama, why didn't my daddy want me?" Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "Sometimes people aren't ready to be parents, sweetheart. It has nothing to do with you. You are perfect and wonderful and so loved." "I wish I had a daddy like other kids," Oliver whispered. Emma held him until he fell asleep, then sat in the darkening living room, her own tears finally falling. She had tried so hard to be enough for Oliver, to give him everything he needed, but she could not give him this. She could not give him a father who stayed. The next morning, Oliver was gone. Emma discovered it when she went to wake him for school. His bed was empty, his jacket missing from the hook by the door. Panic seized her immediately. She searched the apartment, calling his name, her voice rising with each empty room. She called his friends' parents, the school, anyone who might know where he was. No one had seen him. With shaking hands, she dialed Julian's number. He answered on the first ring. "Emma? Oliver's gone," she gasped. "I can't find him. I don't know where he is." "I'm on my way," Julian said immediately. "Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He arrived in 8. Emma was standing on the sidewalk outside her building, her coat thrown over her pajamas, her face pale with fear. Julian pulled her into his arms without hesitation. "We'll find him," he said firmly. "I promise you, we'll find him." "Where would he go?" Emma sobbed. "He's 6 years old. He doesn't know the city." Julian pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes intense. "Think. Where does he feel safe? Where does he go when he's upset?" Emma's mind raced. And then, suddenly, she knew. "The park. The bench where we met you. He asked me about it last week, about why you were there, if you were still sad." They ran. Julian's car was parked illegally in front of the building, and he drove with focused urgency, weaving through morning traffic. Emma gripped the door handle, praying silently, promising anything to anyone who would listen if Oliver was safe. The park appeared ahead, still quiet in the early morning. Julian barely stopped the car before Emma was out, running down the path toward the pond. And there, on the same bench where everything had started, sat Oliver. He was huddled into his jacket, his knees pulled to his chest, his face buried in his arms. Emma reached him first, dropping to her knees in the snow, pulling him into her arms with a cry of relief. "Oliver, baby, why did you leave? You scared me so much." Oliver lifted his tear-stained face. "I wanted to wait like Julian did. I thought maybe if I sat here long enough, my daddy would come find me. Julian got found. Why can't I?" Emma's heart shattered. She held her son tighter, rocking him gently. "Oh, sweetheart." Julian knelt beside them, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. He placed a hand on Oliver's shoulder. "Can I tell you something, Oliver? Something important?" Oliver nodded, sniffling. "I sat on this bench waiting for someone to choose me," Julian said, his voice rough with emotion. "For years, I thought no one ever would. But then you and your mama found me. You chose me when I needed it most. And I want you to know something. I choose you too. Both of you. Every day." Oliver looked up at him, hope and confusion warring in his young face. "But you're not my daddy." "No," Julian agreed. "I'm not. But I could be, if you wanted. If your mama wanted. Because you are not a mistake, Oliver. You are extraordinary. And any man who walked away from you is the one who made a mistake, not you." Emma stared at Julian, tears streaming down her face. "Julian, what are you saying?" He turned to her, and she saw everything in his eyes. Love, fear, hope, determination. "I'm saying I fell in love with both of you. I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I understand what family means. I'm saying I want to be there for Oliver's soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and every moment in between. I'm saying I want to wake up next to you every morning and build a life together. I'm saying I choose you, Emma Bennett. Both of you." Emma could not speak. Her throat was too tight, her heart too full. She looked at Oliver, who was watching Julian with wide eyes. "Would that be okay?" Julian asked Oliver directly. "If I stayed? If I was part of your family?" Oliver launched himself at Julian, wrapping his small arms around his neck. "Yes. Yes, please stay." Julian caught him, holding him close, and Emma saw tears finally spill down his cheeks. She moved closer, wrapping her arms around both of them, and there on that cold bench where loneliness had once lived, a new family was born. Spring arrived slowly in the city, melting snow giving way to green grass and budding trees. Emma stood in the empty storefront on Maple Street, her hands on her hips, trying to envision what it would become. The space was small but charming, with large windows that let in floods of natural light and original hardwood floors that needed refinishing but had good bones. "What do you think?" Julian asked from behind her. He had his tablet tucked under one arm, architect plans displayed on the screen. "I think it's perfect," Emma said, but doubt crept into her voice. "I just don't know if I can afford it. The rent alone would take everything I've saved, and that's before equipment, ingredients, permits." Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, "What if you had an investor? Someone who believed in your vision?" Emma turned to look at him. They had been together for 3 months now, officially, though it felt like longer. Julian had moved slowly, respectfully, never pushing, always asking. He had dinner with them 3 nights a week, took Oliver to baseball practice on Saturdays, held Emma's hand during movies and kissed her goodnight at her door like they were teenagers. It was sweet and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Julian, I can't take your money," Emma said firmly. "This is my dream. I need to build it myself." "It wouldn't be a gift," Julian said. "It would be an investment. A proper business arrangement with contracts and repayment terms. I believe in you, Emma. I believe in this. Let me help you make it real." Emma wanted to say no. Pride demanded it. But as she looked around the empty space, imagining it filled with ovens and display cases and the smell of fresh bread, she felt that dream pulling at her. And more than that, she saw the earnestness in Julian's face, the desire to give her something meaningful. "Okay," she said finally. "But we do this properly. Contracts, repayment schedules, everything official." Julian's smile was brilliant. "Absolutely. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. What Emma did not know was that Julian had already done much more than look at contracts. He had spent weeks researching commercial kitchen equipment, speaking with bakery owners, consulting with business advisors about the best way to structure a small food business for success. He had done it all quietly, without fanfare, because he wanted to give Emma the foundation to build her dream without taking away her agency to create it. The paperwork was signed by the end of the week. Emma Bennett was officially the owner and operator of Oliver's Kitchen, with Julian Westbrook as a silent investor. She threw herself into the work with passion, spending every free moment painting walls, selecting equipment, testing recipes. Julian helped where he could, though he admitted freely that he knew nothing about baking. Oliver became the official taste tester, offering solemn opinions on chocolate chip cookie recipes and brownie textures. But not everyone was happy about Emma's success. Richard Morrison had been trying to lease the Maple Street property for months. He owned 3 upscale restaurants in the city and had wanted to expand into the neighborhood with a trendy bistro. When he learned that some unknown waitress had secured the lease instead, his ego took a hit. When he discovered that waitress was connected to Julian Westbrook, his bruised ego turned to spite. Morrison began making calls. He spoke to suppliers, suggesting that any company who worked with Oliver's Kitchen might find their contracts with Morrison's restaurants under review. He spread rumors through industry channels about Emma's inexperience, her lack of credentials, her reliance on a wealthy boyfriend. He was careful, always staying just on the right side of legality, but his intent was clear. He wanted Emma to fail. Emma started noticing problems 3 weeks before her planned opening. A flour supplier canceled their agreement without explanation. The contractor she had hired to install the commercial oven suddenly doubled his quote. 2 employees she had interviewed and offered positions called to say they had accepted other jobs. Each incident alone could have been coincidence, but together they formed a pattern. She said nothing to Julian at first. Pride again, and the fear that he would solve her problems with money and connections, taking away her sense of accomplishment. But when her insurance application was mysteriously delayed, threatening to push back her opening date, she finally confided in him. Julian listened quietly, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "This is Richard Morrison," he said finally. "It has his fingerprints all over it. You know him? We've crossed paths in business circles. He's petty and vindictive when he doesn't get his way." Julian's eyes were hard. "Let me handle this." "No," Emma said immediately. "I don't want you fighting my battles. Emma, he's trying to sabotage you because of me. That makes it my battle too." "Please," Emma said, taking his hand. "Let me try to handle it first. If I can't, then we'll figure something out together." Julian agreed reluctantly, though Emma could see the frustration in his face. She knew he wanted to protect her, to use his wealth and influence to crush anyone who threatened her. But that was not who Emma was. She needed to face this herself. She requested a meeting with Morrison at his flagship restaurant. He agreed, likely out of curiosity more than anything else. They met over coffee in the early afternoon, the restaurant empty between lunch and dinner service. Morrison was a man in his 50s, well-dressed and polished, with cold eyes that assessed Emma like she was a minor inconvenience. "Miss Bennett," he said with false warmth. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I know what you've been doing," Emma said directly. "The supplier cancellations, the contractor issues, the rumors. I'm asking you to stop." Morrison's smile did not waver. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Business is competitive. Perhaps you're simply discovering that you're not equipped for this industry. Perhaps you're discovering that intimidation only works on people who scare easily," Emma replied calmly. "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Morrison. Oliver's Kitchen will open on schedule, with or without your interference." Something flickered in Morrison's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or maybe just surprise that she had confronted him directly. "You're dating Julian Westbrook." Do you really think you've earned this success, or did you simply sleep your way into it? Emma stood, her hands steady despite the anger burning in her chest. I earned every single thing I have, including Julian's respect. My relationship with him has nothing to do with my bakery, my skills, or my worth. But your jealousy has everything to do with yours. Good day, Mr. Morrison. She walked out with her head high, her heart pounding. She had faced him down, but she knew it might not be enough. Men like Morrison did not stop simply because they were confronted. She was right. 2 days later, the health inspector appeared for an unscheduled visit, clearly expecting to find violations. Emma walked him through the immaculate kitchen, showed him every permit and certificate, answered every question with calm professionalism. He left without issuing a single citation, looking almost disappointed. That evening, Julian appeared at her door with takeout and a determined expression. We need to talk. Emma let him in, and they sat at her small kitchen table while Oliver did homework in his room. Morrison isn't going to stop, Julian said without preamble. I've made some calls. He's been doing this for years, crushing competition through intimidation and manipulation. I stood up to him, Emma said. I thought that would be enough. It won't be. Not with him. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. Emma, I know you want to do this yourself. I respect that so much. But sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she asked, what would you do? I would make it very clear that any further interference with your business will result in consequences he won't enjoy. I have lawyers who specialize in business litigation. I have connections with every supplier in this city. I have the resources to make sure Morrison understands that you are under my protection, and touching you means touching me. That sounds like you're declaring war, Emma said. I'm declaring that the people I love are off limits, Julian corrected. There's a difference. Emma looked at him, this man who had been so alone and was now ready to fight for her. Okay, she said softly. But we do it together. Your resources, my voice. Agreed? Julian smiled. Agreed. The next week was swift and decisive. Julian's legal team sent Morrison a detailed letter outlining every instance of interference, with evidence and witness statements Emma had carefully documented. They made it clear that any further action would result in a lawsuit for tortious interference and business defamation. Simultaneously, Julian made personal calls to suppliers, not to threaten but to vouch for Emma's professionalism and vision. The effect was immediate. Suppliers began returning Emma's calls. The insurance application was suddenly approved. Word spread through the industry that Oliver's Kitchen had powerful backing, and that crossing Emma Bennett meant crossing Julian Westbrook. Morrison backed off. He was smart enough to know when he was outmatched. 3 weeks later, on a beautiful Saturday morning in May, Oliver's Kitchen opened its doors. The line stretched down the block. Emma stood behind the counter in her new apron, her hair pulled back, flour dusting her hands, and felt pure joy. Julian and Oliver were there, Oliver proudly wearing a miniature apron that matched his mother's, Julian managing the register with surprising competence. The bakery was everything Emma had dreamed. Warm and welcoming, filled with the scent of fresh bread and pastries, the display cases gleaming with her creations. She had done this. Yes, Julian had helped, but she had built it with her own hands, her own vision, her own determination. As the day wound down and the last customer left satisfied, Emma locked the door and turned to find Julian and Oliver waiting for her. They stood together near the window, backlit by the golden evening sun, and Emma felt her heart expand with love so fierce it almost hurt. Julian pulled a small box from his pocket. He knelt down, and Emma's breath caught. Emma Bennett, he said, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. You saved me. You and Oliver gave me a family when I thought I would spend my life alone. You showed me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. I want to share everything with you. Every triumph, every struggle, every ordinary beautiful moment. Will you marry me? Emma was crying, tears streaming down her face as she nodded. Yes. Yes, of course yes. Oliver cheered, jumping up and down, and Julian stood to slide the ring onto Emma's finger. It was beautiful but not ostentatious, a single diamond in a vintage setting that looked like it belonged to another era. It was my foster mother's, Julian said quietly. The one woman who was kind to me, who told me I would find my family someday. She left it to me when she passed. I want you to have it. Emma kissed him then, there in her bakery surrounded by everything she had built, and felt complete. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, they returned to the park. The same bench where everything had started. Emma and Julian sat together, bundled against the cold, while Oliver played in the snow nearby. They were married now, living in a home they had chosen together, a place big enough for all of them and the baby girl who would arrive in spring. Do you ever think about that night? Emma asked, leaning her head on Julian's shoulder. Every day, Julian said. I think about how close I came to giving up. How I sat here believing I would always be alone. But you weren't alone, Emma said softly. We found you. You saved me, Julian corrected, kissing her temple. We saved each other, Emma said. And as snow began to fall softly around them, as Oliver's laughter echoed across the park, as the lights of the city glowed warm in the distance, they sat together on that bench where loneliness had once lived and love had taken root, knowing that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the simplest acts of kindness.